Tunnen mielen lautoisen sijoittuva dipryvä kertoo tarinan tutustua annosta. Jotkut joutuu pakenemaan valkoista Ameriaa, kun he hanovat sosiaalista Suomessa. Aino ja hänen perheesi asuvat saari Venäjä helmikuun 1899 manifestin jälkeisenä aikana joku harjoitti Suomessa palkallislentoja ja esitti Nikolaisen toiseksi ja hänen kersaillisen hantuksensa halventansa. Aino becomes involved with the labor movement after she moves onto her brother's farm in Washington state. At the turn of the 20th century, the lumber industry was getting big, and they heavily exploited immigrant communities. So the Greeks, Swedes, Finns, and other immigrants there were all heavily underpaid and seen as expendable. This also meant that there were little to no labor protections. Karmalantis goes into a lot of detail about like the dangers of the labor industry, and it gets pretty graphic about what can happen to workers, especially when they are working very long hours and don't have any safety protection. So she becomes involved in the labor community, and it's loosely based off of his grandmother and grandfather. I like to read a lot of historical fiction. If I'm, trying to learn about, Marxist-Leninism or the academic side of communism, I'm more likely to listen to it, or just more likely to listen to it. And I needed a break from that type of reading. So if you want to learn about labor movements in the US, I definitely recommend it. Now, at the time, Washington state was like a sundown town, so there were no black workers to exploit. There were actually instances of them chasing out Chinese immigrants to make room for white people. And along with that, there's not much mention of the indigenous people there. One character, she's like a medicine woman who lives on her own, and her tribe has effectively been wiped out. So there is mention of her, but it's kind of like she's a side character. So the book goes through the turn of the century and World War I, and something that is very relatable to today is the Espionage Act. And if you're not familiar, it basically says it's used as a gag order on journalists, but has also been used to oppress workers. Workers were jailed using that act, and today it's used against Julian Assange, who is rotting away in a prison in the UK because America is the home of freedom of speech. And in the turn of the 19th century, it was used to discourage strikes, and the government was focused on producing munitions for war, and apparently that meant to them that the workers' safety didn't matter as long as the businesses and the owners met their quota. So to meet their quotas and increase the amount of profit, they reduce the amount of breaks and other safety precautions. So if labor organizers tried to strike, then the army would be brought in. Actually, we just had the anniversary of Blair Mountain, which, if you didn't know, that was the most recent war fought on US soil. And I say war because US citizens were killed. I believe it was the National Guard that was called in, very similar to how the National Guard is called in after Katrina and after protests, which really isn't what they're for. Troops can be brought in to break up strikes, push out workers from their camps, and intimidate them to go back to work.